So I've lived the scale of consciousness from 50 on up to 600s. I'm currently in the lower 600s, which is right below non-duality, but I've peaked up into non-duality for a full evening, so I know also that level personally. And today I want to share my story in a nutshell from going from 50 on the scale to the 600s. So bear with me because it's going to be a fun ride. So basically I was born in the mid 300s, which is many people are, and because of the mass consciousness at that time was much lower, and because of other things too, I gradually descended, which most people also do, down the scale, and I ended up all the way down in level 50, in which I was spent at least 1 or 2 years very low down in that area, and I was drinking very hard, very depressed, very completely fucked up, had no sense of any future that would be nice. I just didn't fit in. I just felt really, it was horrible. It's not a good place to be. So it came to a head, and I had to do something. And luckily I had some good friends also, not only bad ones, and they helped me. And I found yoga to be very good for me. So I started doing yoga classes, because doing yoga, physical yoga, that helped force me into the now. So for the first time I had clarity. I felt like the past and all that bullshit that normally was going on didn't matter, because I came into the now, and I felt free of the depression when I was doing yoga. And I started doing yoga a lot, like, many hours every morning and every night for at least for many, many months. And it really made the juices started flowing again, and my energy system woke up sort of, and I felt more confident, and suddenly I breached the 200 barrier at some point, and I still remember to this day what happened. I was working in a shop, grocery store, and I was a student at the time, and it was like suddenly something switched from being upside down to being right again. And I realized it was my orientation had been downwards, because when you're caught below 200, you're like in a downward self-destructive spiral, basically. So, and you don't know, because you can't see. It's like a barrier on a 200 level. You can't see above it, because you're actually looking down. Instead, you're looking down the drain in which you're circling, kind of, just to put it that way. So I broke the barrier of 200, and it was like something switched upside down inside me, and I felt like I was going crazy, and didn't know if I wanted to laugh or cry. It was really, and I was I was at work in a big supermarket, grocery, when this happened. So I just had to run into the post eating room, or to the toilet or something, just to not seem completely nuts to the customers. And luckily it sort of calmed down after a few minutes, and I felt better about it, so I could go back to work. But that was how it was for me to breach the 200 level barrier. And from that point on, I felt my life started changing a lot, because it's a big deal when you go above 200. It reflects in the physical reality, or the outside reality, the big changes you have made inside. So my life started changing a lot, but I continued doing yoga. But now I also started including meditation, which I read about online or something. I learned it. I didn't go to any teachers. I just learned how to do it by myself. And I formally meditated every day for some time. And at this time, I was also writing poetry a lot. And I wanted to be a poet when I was a student. But then, for some reason, when I started meditating a lot, uh, I felt like the state I was in when I wrote good poetry, sort of inspirational state, I could access that state in meditation, and that you feel good in that state because you get more into the now. So I didn't feel like writing anymore because I would rather meditate instead of writing, because I could prolong, because the inspiration would come in bursts here and there, but when I meditated it would be more stable and I could access it anytime I wanted. So I just stopped writing and I started focusing on meditation instead. But I still did a lot of yoga also. And then I had some illnesses that also started coming up, because when you cleanse yourself in the mind, you can also, it will sometimes manifest as illnesses in the body. And I had to deal with those and heal those, and I went on a big journey of alternative medication and all sorts of stuff and I got rid of those problems. And then I managed to get myself all the way up in the 300s doing yoga and meditation. And that's when I met my first enlightened teacher. As they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And that's how it was for me too. And I went on retreats with this guy. Was at 1,000. He had a big following, and he was a great teacher. And I went to retreats for 3 weeks at the time. And the very first retreat, I went there alone and didn't know anybody, but it went really well. And he took me into the 400s, or just sitting in the energy field that's generated by such a high level teacher. You automatically, if you tune in, you will automatically, or you can automatically climb the ladder of consciousness without doing too much. But I also did a lot of exercises on those retreats that were packed with people and all sorts of weird spiritual exercises and dances and whatnot. So all in all, first retreat took me up into the 400s, into the higher 400s actually, and that's at that time I was doing a master degree, and or yeah, I think I was at least, or yeah, I was a student, still a student at least, and anyway, I also started becoming much more intellectually focused. Sort of in the 400s, you become very. It's a very you're on top of the world. You have very good confidence. You have you're powerful intellect. Because you're higher than most people at that level, and it feels really good. But it's also a bottleneck on top of that level, because it's hard to breach the 400 level and get into the 500s, because it's like you're in a cocoon that feels very safe and strong. And I also noticed very different when I was in the 300s before the retreat. Women didn't pay too much attention to me, but when I was in the 400s, suddenly all sorts of women who never looked at me or cared about me, when I worked in that shop, they suddenly became really interested. Like 4 or 5 women that were really hot and nice, and they never paid attention to me before. But that's how much of a difference it makes what level you're at. It's like they can see something in your aura, or you have a different. You just look different, even physically. Maybe you look much more strong and confident, and suddenly the women got interested. But anyway, side note. So what happened next was that I continued to go to retreats with this master teacher in 1,000 level. And the next retreat, uh, I he did something unexpected, because I had never seen him get mad or anything like that. But he doesn't really get mad; it's all an act to help you. But what happened was that I wrote him a letter and he read it up in front of everybody. And then I thought he would respond very differently, but instead he hammered me completely, like very strongly. And I was like in complete chaos inside, because I always expected just loving responses, but suddenly he was like pretending to be angry. I know that he's never really angry. It's a game he plays to help fix things inside you that he can see. And especially in the high 400s, you need to be hammered sometimes, because you need to break that cocoon. And that's exactly what he did. He broke the cocoon, but I could have taken it the wrong way. My ego could have taken it. I could have got pissed off, told him to fuck off and just run out and never come back, but I didn't, luckily. I went to my cabin, and it took a few days for the chaos to sort of, it was complete chaos inside me. So what I did, at some point, I just surrendered to it. I said, okay, he must know what he's doing, and I don't. So I'm going to allow this. And then the chaos disappeared, and a completely new reality opened up. And I was in the lower 500s. And he noticed, and he said that I was lucky that I've taken it the right way. So he noticed that it might change. And then I went home again to normal life for a while, and then I went to even on another retreat, and that was when some big changes and things happened, which completely changed my life. Because on the very first satsang, which is when you sit and meditate with a teacher, the high-level teacher, that's called satsang. And the very first satsang, that retreat, which was back in, I guess, 2008, I think. I started feeling, I felt very strongly Kundalini energy running up my spine from the bottom up to my head, hitting my brain with pleasure waves. And this Kundalini experience it became stronger and stronger for every satsang, every day. And it came to a head when I was alone meditating in my cabin. Something happened because I could also get the Kundalini when I was alone at that point. It came really strong up the spine, and my third eye, or the pineal gland, or I felt like in the middle of my head, there was this very strong energy, a little ball that vibrated strongly, like it was activating, doing something with the pineal gland, I guess. And after a while, I could move this energy ball up and down my spine as I wanted with my will power, and suddenly there was a candlelight flickering at a table a few meters away, and was kind of bothering me. And then this ball of energy actually went out of my head and towards this candlelight, which was flickering in the draft, and it stopped the light flickering cold. So the candle, even though there was a draft, the candlelight didn't flicker anymore. It stopped flickering. I'm not even joking. It actually happened like that. And then the energy ball came back in my head, and I sort of came out of the experience. And after that, or one more thing happened. It was like before I came out of it, it was like almost like a machine or something, like something weird came in from behind, and it sort of cut off my mind. Like the roots of my mind were cut. And when I came out of the experience, I was like completely living in the now. I didn't have, it was like everything past was gone. I didn't have thoughts dragging my attention away from what's happening in the now. Before that experience, if I close my eyes and try to meditate, I would always fall into thoughts and dreams inside. That you lose attention, kind of. But after that experience, I was permanently in, and have been ever since, in the now, with no thoughts having any power to drag me away from the now or make me lose attention and focus. So that became a permanent change. But I knew even then that this wasn't enlightenment. It wasn't so. And at that time, I actually could measure myself with my dosing rods, and I measured myself to 545. So I breached into the unconditional love level. And that was the only time I saw the teacher a bit shocked, because at the next satsang, I sat down and he came in and everybody sat down, and when he looked around at everybody, he came to me, and he was like a little bit, I could see he was a little bit shocked, like, wow, something has happened. But he didn't say anything, I didn't say anything, but he sort of recognized that, hey, something strange has happened with this guy. And after that, I could meditate and get fully blasted with Kundalini energy up my spine at any given time I wanted, and it'll hit my brain with pleasure waves. And this it's like like my spine was on fire for. It lasted for maybe 6 months, maybe up to a year. Then it sort of calmed down. I can still do it to a certain degree, but if I want to, but I don't really focus on that then too much anymore. It can be a distraction if you focus on it too much anyway. And I would just sit around in parks and just see the world became really beautiful at for that period. I would sit around in parks and look at flowers and just be alone a lot, because being with other people at that level it was very hard, because I could sort of sense all the repressed negativity inside people, because you become so pure inside that you can sense other people's issues and you sort of take them on yourself. So I try to avoid people as much as possible. And the last thing the teacher said to me, not to me directly, but he sort of aimed it at me probably. The last thing the teacher said before I left the retreat was, when you have found love, you have more than enough keeping people away from you. And that was exactly how I felt. I had more than enough keeping people away from me. And I spent most of my time alone, isolating myself more and more from people, because it felt so bad. I couldn't be around them. It was, I didn't know what to do. Okay, it was really horrible in one sense. But I was so happy when I was alone, but with people, especially groups of people, it was horrible. Unless I drank, I had to drink to be social, because otherwise, because drinking gives you a buffer zone and it lowers your consciousness. So I had to drink whenever I wanted to be social. I had to drink, so that's what I did. Unless I would be alone and isolated myself in my flat. And this went on for some years, and gradually the blissfulness sort of went into uh, gradually, very gradually, into more of a depression, because I was neglecting life for so many years that, and I didn't know how to handle that level. Being in normal society, it wasn't. I didn't know what to do. So that's just how it went, and I became gradually more depressed. Started drinking again, more than I should, and even though I was at a high level, I still felt bad, and I didn't understand why. Because where did all the bliss go? Where did all the all that go? But then I think it happened because I had to be forced back into life again. I couldn't keep isolating myself. I think my higher mind or whatever made this happen. So I was forced into to life again, and that's a lot of stuff happened. But I met another teacher, and I moved to a different country, and I met another. For some reason, it's like wherever I go, there is an enlightened teacher almost. Because I didn't move there because of an enlightened teacher. I moved there because of a job, and it was a small country, and still there I found an enlightened teacher, and I went to a satsang. I knew he was enlightened the first time I met him. I knew instantly that I could see it, and he was also into the scale of consciousness, and he even had it on the wall in his flat when he held the satsang in his flat, and he pointed at it and he said, "You are here." And he pointed to 540 and the 540s, and I said, "Yeah, I know, I can measure it myself." And he laughed, and then we became friends, and we were friends. We are friends still, and and he helped me. I had many private sessions with him, and with him, something. It was like I had an experience. It's like I get every time I meditated with him, I had pressure, because all the Kundalini kept like a pressure in my head. So not painful, but almost painful, because it became so much pressure in my head every time I went to a session with him. And at some point, the top of my head sort of popped. It was like I could feel the energy, or it was like not the physical skull, obviously, but it almost felt like the physical skull opened up, but it didn't. But some energy, just it's like a champagne cork popped up, and at the very second that happened, the teacher said to me, pointed at me and said, "Welcome home." So he could actually see that energy popped up, like he could see the energy happening. But after that, for some reason, I started feeling bad again, and I couldn't understand, because he confirmed I was now in the 600s, low 600s, and I could measure it myself too. But still, I felt more and more depressed and fucked up. And he said his theory, or he said it's because now all the stuff has to leave you, and all the stuff that you have still has to leave you. But I thought everything has already left me, because how can I be this high if I still have all this stuff inside? So it didn't make sense to me. But what makes sense to me is that the core of the ego, which I call Lucifer, the inner Lucifer, is what you have to face in the lower 600s, and that is what, and that core of the ego is pure rage and hate, and it will do anything it can to stop you from integrating even that back into source, so you can actually get into non-duality, which is the higher 600s. So that's that's when I got all the downloads and made this my first videos you can see about the whole core of the ego thing, and made my whole website and all this, because I got a massive download about how this works. So that's why I was really angry at everything. I wanted to see the whole world go up in flames. That's how I felt inside. I wanted a nuclear disaster, just the whole world to just blow up. I was angry at humanity, angry at, I just felt rage all the time. I didn't take it out on anybody, and I could still feel good, but it was always there, like always something nagging inside, always, constantly, always, all the time. I could never get out of it. So that's why I always started drinking a lot, because that's what the only time I could feel good was when I was drunk. Because I didn't know how to deal with this inner core of the ego. I didn't know how to get rid of it, and I still don't. But it has become a lot better now. But it's still not. I'm still not in non-duality. You have to reach non-duality to get rid of all that. But I don't know how to do that, and I don't think you can do anything to get into non-duality. You can do a lot to get close to it, but at some point it just has to happen. And for me, I've been so into enlightenment that I sort of trapped myself into a corner, that because my only focus had been enlightenment and all these things, and I neglected a lot of life stuff. So what I did, I just went on a long vacation and said, "Fuck you to enlightenment. I don't care about you anymore," like I talked about in another video. And I just did a lot of worldly stuff, uh, partying and these kind of things, not thinking about enlightenment or spirituality at all, just having fun, good old fun. And that changed me. That really helped. That balanced everything out for me. And now I'm much more even keeled, but still not in non-duality. And still there is something. It's not the rage is much less, and it's not as intense, but it's still a little bit left over of this inner core of the ego, which is very hard to get rid of apparently, and I'm still combating it, or trying to find a way to integrate it and get into non-duality, which is what I'm doing now. But I'm not really, meditating or doing anything spiritual. Trying to be relaxed about it and not think too much about it, and just have normal fun and do my thing. But it has been an interesting journey, and I think it has given me knowledge of the essence of every major level, from the below 200 to the 200s to the 300s to the 400s to the 500s, and now to the 600s, and hopefully to the upper 600s, and hopefully one day all the way to 1000. It has given me a very good knowledge of every single level of the scale, because I felt the essence of it, how it is to travel through it, and the scale, on my body, mind, soul complex, you could say. So it's been quite a journey, and still it's a long way ahead. But I hope maybe people will benefit from the knowledge I'm sharing here. So thank you for listening.